Breaking down the Gamergate, the toxic side of gaming culture. This is actually life imitating art. You look at this thumbnail, and I didn't even actually make this connection at first, but it didn't take long. You're looking at these three clueless black women, right? And they're on a Skype call, and they're calling it an online summit. Online Summit 2024, and they're speaking with authority about a hobby they don't know or care anything about. And I realize, hey, this is that meme. This is this representation meme.
Oh my God! God damn it! You can't make this shit up!
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Saladino.
Dreams what I'm chasing, flow hot as chafing. This is why I'm hot, no, that is why I'm blazing.
Hello, and welcome back to the Black Girl Gamers Online Summit. Welcome to the last panel of the day. I know. I hope you've had an amazing time, and we are going to end this with some authentic, real conversations about the industry, something that I know a lot of us wanted to talk about and experience, and during the time we could not. So this is going to be a pivotal panel. In this panel, we're going to use Gamergate as the backdrop, and we'll discuss the realities of gaming culture, the intersections with gaming community, and how people can be accountable allies.
So Jayan, the CEO of Black Girl Gamers, the group hosting this online summit, talks about how they're going to use Gamergate as a backdrop to talk about the industry and the gaming community, so that devs, publishers, and game journals can learn from them how they can be accountable allies in the war against the actual customers. And I love how this is called All Eyes on Us. They've imposed themselves on a hobby they don't care anything about because it's become popular, and because across all of pop culture, all of culture really, feminists with useless college degrees realized they could grift their way into a career by using their identity to trigger white liberal guilt. All they had to say is marginalized people are just as shallow and narcissistic as you guys, and they've gotten away with destroying popular entertainment franchises and hobbies by making the focus about them and their political agendas and their emotional anxieties and their mental health issues. In a sane world, no one in the gaming industry would spend more than 20 seconds on something like this online summit.
I'll be joined by Ash Parrish, staff writer at The Verge, who writes with a focus on covering marginalized gamers and their communities.
Right.
What does that even mean? With a focus on marginalized gamers and their communities. Is she doing on-the-ground reporting? Is she going to marginalized gamer hotspots like is she talking to a group of fat women, a trans woman or something, and asking for their eyewitness accounts of seeing Eve from Stellar Blade? And then like, oh my God, she's just way too sexualized. Look at all those jiggle physics. As a fat woman, I can't compete with nothing like that. Or they'd probably say, as a fluffy woman, I can't compete with nothing like that. How am I supposed to live knowing there's gamers out there playing games with a woman who looks like that?
I think it's just men that's never touched a woman in their life not knowing what the they look like, and so they're like, this is what women in my video games always looked like, so why are we changing it? It's like, because it's not real, bro. Ain't nobody got time for that.
And Kim Belair, CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., a narrative consultancy based in Canada. Kim has worked as a writer, narrative designer, and consultant on projects such as Sable, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2, and many more. So let's meet our panelists. Hi, hello. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. This is obviously a very topical and sensitive subject. So first of all, I just want to thank you both for being here and for being willing to share your experiences. I know we've all, myself included, been targeted by the phenomenon that is Gamergate. And I firstly want to start off with thanking you for your bravery to be here and speak, but also now leading into the panel, tell me briefly about your experiences during the Gamergate phenomenon. We'll start with you, Ash.
So right off the bat, they're setting up this victim narrative. They're the focus of Gamergate. All eyes on us. 3 black women who don't know or care about games, only worried about the most surface level representation, doing an online summit together. Gaming is a hobby. It's not a support group. The reason why all eyes are on them is because they made it their mission to set themselves up between the gaming industry and the gaming industry's customers.
The Gamergate phenomenon. We'll start with you, Ash, and just give me a brief synopsis of what you experienced.
So, I am a video game journalist, and if you know nothing about Gamergate, one of their main hated enemies more than anything is a video game journalist who is not afraid to speak truth to power.
Now, Ashley Parrish definitely comes off the worst in this panel. She's obnoxious. She looks like Urkel if Urkel was a lesbian, and she sounds genuinely like a sociopath. She's talking about gamers not liking game journals who speak truth to power, when that isn't it at all. Game journals aren't speaking truth to power. Game journals are shills. They're not even journalists for the most part. They're activists trying to destroy the industry by making it about them. Now, by speaking truth to power, Parrish must be saying that going against the actual customer base is speaking truth to power. She's saying straight white men are the power. So, in this crazy person's mind, black people, gay people, women who come to gaming are actually prisoners of the whims and desires and passions of straight white men. They're being forced to play games with straight white male leads or sexy women with jiggle physics. And so it's up to these three goofballs to save the industry.
And my experience with that whole chicanery is that they popped up. I went and embedded in their Discord and listened to the kinds of things that they were saying and why they were saying those things. Wrote a piece about how this second Gamergate is a bit smaller and sadder than what it was 10 years ago. And, whenever you write about those kinds of things, it really kicks a hornet's nest over. And so you get all these kinds of negative attention on your social media, in your email, those kinds of things. I've gotten death threats to my voicemail that I've had to, call the FBI about. And that's just what happens when you try to do your job as a journalist and write about these things that are happening in a truthful and authentic kind of way. And sometimes people don't like that. And my experience with that whole chicanery is that they popped up.
How did they pop up, Ashley? Why did they pop up? She's talking about chicanery and how gamers get mad when journals report things in a truthful way. But hey, Ashley, this you? The Verge's Ash Parrish admits her Sweet Baby Inc. defense piece ignores how company employee called for harassment. Including this detail makes it seem like the inciting incident is on equal footing with what happened next. That's not supposed to be up to you to decide. If you're a genuine, honest journalist, you're just going to report what happened and let the reader decide. In committing one of perhaps the most blatant instances of journalistic dishonesty in recent years, it appears that in publishing a piece running defense for Sweet Baby Inc., The Verge's Ash Parrish chose to voluntarily omit the fact that the situation surrounding the company only garnered mainstream attention after one of its employees attempted to harass a critic because it would validate her opponent's arguments. Nobody dislikes Ashley Parrish for who or what she is. They dislike her for what she does. That's the case for all these women on this panel. They've each done things to gamers. And I'm not saying that in a sensationalistic or inciting kind of way. Their priorities have nothing to do with gaming. What they want, the changes they make and push for, are not about gaming. Again, they're the meme. They're the first part of the meme. Following that first part of the meme, the three little black girls or whatever, following that is why gaming, particularly in the West, although it's definitely affecting Japan in a lot of ways too, that's why gaming is having so many problems. And this is why nobody likes these three.
Yeah, and Kim, I know obviously with the company and the good work that you've done, your organization and yourself were huge targets in this phenomenon. Tell us about your experience as well.
Yeah, I would say I think of us almost in as like patient zero of this wave of Gamergate, in that I
Yeah, Sweet Baby Inc. is absolutely patient zero in this Gamergate 2.0 nonsense. Thanks to that piece of shit, Chris Kendrick.
It's a tragedy. I just made that word up. I did!
But let's see how Kim frames it.
Yeah, I would say I think of us almost in as like patient zero of this wave of Gamergate, in that I think when I think of it as where it started, it was kind of the week that we had announced that we were on both Alan Wake 2 and Spider-Man 2, which are two, I think, popular games among the game community and players in general. And immediately, I think the targeting began with this kind of like...
People finding out about Sweet Baby Inc. and criticizing them it was not targeting, any more than the Steam detected list was targeting. This was never about targeting. This was about calling Sweet Baby Inc. out for the work that they were doing and avoiding games that they worked on. This didn't just happen in a vacuum. For years, gamers have been calling out this woke shit. And just around the time people found out about Sweet Baby Inc., all of these stories about sensitivity readers censoring Roald Dahl and James Bond for the dumbest reasons were popping up. Then you see that there's a sensitivity reader group in games, and suddenly, gamers realize that this shit goes beyond just game journals constantly complaining about sexy women in games, and more than diversity hires with blue hair or artistic men pretending not only to be women, but pretending to be trans women, purposefully uglifying women, or making every new game star an ugly, angry black lesbian. It was now actual consultancy firms taking a page out of Anita Sarkeesian's playbook, joining the fray.
And immediately, I think the targeting began with this kind of like, we found this secret, sinister website from Sweet Baby Inc. Meanwhile, we're on Twitter like, I've been so excited to let people know that we worked on these two really great games.
Yeah, they were excited to let people know about the games they worked on until gamers started going, wait a minute, Alan Wake 2 suddenly is making you play as a race-swap black woman. MJ looks like a dude. And you start going, Sweet Baby Inc., what kind of name is that? And you go to their website and you see the other games they worked on. Goodbye, Volcano High. God of War Ragnarok, where suddenly you have Black Vikings and that whole storyline with Freya's brother, and those ethnically diverse goofballs who have nothing to do with the story suddenly being forced into it. And you see their mission statement on their website about how they're there to put diversity and inclusion in the games. And then you go, oh, now I see. Now it's starting to make sense.
The assumption was essentially made that our work on that had not been story or narrative or character related. It had been to make a black character exist in Alan Wake 2, and I think to put pride flags in Spider-Man 2. And that was kind of like the assumption that we had wokeified the video games. And then that...
Now, I said that Ashley Parrish comes off looking the worst on this panel in more ways than one. But that doesn't mean that Kim Belair isn't terrible in this either. This thing about how gamers didn't think they actually worked on the game's narratives or stories is ridiculous. Woke isn't separate from narrative story elements. That's all of a piece. Not sure how they keep doing this thing where they think they're slick, like that stupid-ass article Alyssa Mercante wrote, where she's talking about how they just help companies fix the narrative. But the narrative is a big part of the problem with the games they work on. Kratos acting like some overbearing mother, whining and crying and sniveling over Atreus, to the point where he doesn't want Atreus to grow up to be a man or a god. Harley Quinn's vile lecture to Batman before she shoots him in the head, where literally Batman has become the stand-in for the straight white male audience who love Batman. The MJ boss fight, the worst boss fight in gaming history, where the boss, MJ, is lecturing Peter on being a superhero, saving lives, instead of sitting around the house while she runs off to have a career.
You're off having fun being Spider-Man, while I have to give my flat ass up to J. Jonah Jameson just to pay the bills.
Let me do what I have to do!
You're right! I've been selfish! I was so wrapped up in my own life, I never thought about yours! But let's handle this MJ's way!
Been to make a black character exist in Alan Wake 2, and I think to put pride flags in Spider-Man 2. And that was kind of like the assumption that we had wokeified the video games. And then...
Okay, so the gaslighting when it comes to Alan Wake 2 is hilarious. They keep acting like Saga Anderson isn't a race swap character when she obviously is. Like, I mean, her name is Saga Anderson. She's supposed to be Scandinavian. In the game, she has a white grandfather, a white Viking grandfather. Nobody before this woke shit would have made a black Viking character. Doesn't make sense. It's stupid. It's almost the opposite of the whole point of a Scandinavian. Kim Belair herself, in several presentations, has talked about how she's pushed to change the race of characters the devs already created. Sweet Baby Inc.'s website, before they changed some of the language, boasted about how much diversity and inclusion they put in games. Sweet Baby Inc. definitely race-swapped Saga Anderson. And as far as Spider-Man, people aren't talking about, oh, they put pride flags in it. People are talking about MJ looking like a trans woman. And how there's an entire section of the game where you play as some deaf black girl. For no reason. The character has nothing to do with Spider-Man. But it's in the game because a woman who works for Sweet Baby Inc. and is deaf or just has bad hearing wanted to put representation in the game. Gamers are talking about how Miles Morales, who is literally just a carbon copy of the real Spider-Man, is a Mary Sue compared to Peter. And it's so egregious that they literally have Peter telling Miles,
Wow. Reforming your greatest enemy. Can't say I've ever done that. Maybe MJ was right. Why would the city need me when it has you?
shit like this is wokeifying video games. That's what that means.
Led to, as a company, we worked on over 80 games together, so there was plenty of fodder for people to start going, oh, is this the reason that all of these games are now woke, that they have people of color in them or queer people or any marginalized identities at all? Or even sometimes that, they perceive like, oh, this woman's design is not quite as it used to be, and I think it used to be hotter. So there's a lot of stuff that's been put on us, both things that we did work on, things that we didn't, and then we kind of just became shorthand for the wokeification, quote unquote, of gaming.
This Weasley thing Kim does where she goes, oh, this female character is not quite the same as she used to be. I think she used to be hotter. No one is saying it like that. It's obvious. Just look at Arkham Knight Harlequin versus the Sweet Baby Inc. infected Suicide Squad kills the Justice League Harley, or Harley Quinn. Just compare the two. And to go back to Spider-Man 2 Electric Boogaloo, just look at MJ. As soon as MJ was revealed, people went off. They were roasting the shit out of that ugly ass character. In the first game, the only real issue people had with MJ, I personally thought MJ was too white bread and Karen looking in the first game because that's not MJ. MJ is a dime piece. But in the first game, the main problem was those stupid ass stealth missions. But in 2, not only did they make her uglier, which is all a part of not sexualizing female characters, which is very much a Sweet Baby Inc. feminist agenda. And like I keep saying, in order to make MJ as desexualized and unsexy as possible, they have to make her look like a man. That's just the simple truth of it. But not only did they design her to defeat the male gaze, they also insisted on keeping the stealth missions. And the only reason why they did it is because they had to include playable female characters in the game. That's all a part of the diversity and inclusion shtick. They can't just make a Spider-Man game starring Peter Parker with maybe a couple of Miles Morales side missions, or not having Miles in the game at all. No, you have to have diversity and inclusion and representation. So even though it doesn't make sense, even though gamers said stop doing this with the forced MJ stealth missions, they put them back in the game anyway. Having this fool running around with a backpack like Ellie, taking out dudes twice her size in venom monstrosities. And then they even added a deaf black girl sequence to the game on top of all of that, just to be like, fuck you bigots.
Yeah, I think, we all saw it, and with Sweet Baby becoming essentially, they used your company and yourself as a synonym for what they describe as wokeifying gaming, really. And similar to your experiences, we experienced death threats for the team. The team were worried about putting on this summit, hence why we've held it in this platform in general, because there was a lot of relentless harassment, death threats, emails, comments to a small team. And one of the things,
as far as the death threats and harassment claims go, they lie so much and twist the narrative so much that I ultimately don't take it seriously. They conflate criticism and videos being made about them and replies on tweets as harassment. And my thing is, like I say about these trans activists who keep saying their lives are threatened every day, yet as soon as someone makes fan art of straight couples being straight, or as some VTuber says they're going to stream Hogwarts Legacy, these assholes start sending death threats and harassing people. If they were so afraid of being hurt just for existing, they wouldn't be attacking people so brazenly. If I were trans, and I saw people acting like this online, I would be afraid to leave the house. But no. These so-called trans women talk all kinds of shit online. and then act like victims when someone on YouTube says Abby is actually a man. So I don't really take the claim seriously. But one thing I did want to point out, how Jayanne is talking about the harassment they get, but they're not saying why. I know one reason could definitely be how they went after farm folks for tweeting to their community fans some jiggle physics demos and asking for feedback. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Black Girl Gamers tweets at them, "This ain't it. As you can imagine, boobs are a sensitive subject, especially since women have been subject to a lot of vitriol in gaming lately, and the latest discourse regarding sexualization of characters. If this is indeed has body positivity intention, then in future, it may be worth changing the copy of the tweet to reflect that, i.e. hashtag body positivity. Additionally, if your bio disclosed that the game is meant to be an adult farming simulator, then that might curb people's reaction to this post a little bit." Black Girl Gamers can go legitimately fuck themselves. This is why these three women, with their stupid pronouns next to their names, are getting the flack they get from gamers. Nobody asked these assholes to be the hall monitors of gaming. Nobody cares if they have a problem with jiggle physics in games, or that Bruce Wayne is a straight white man, or that nobody wants to play as MJ in a Spider-Man game. You're not improving gaming by making it about a small group of tourists who only got into gaming because it's popular, not because they actually care about it.
One of the things that actually also affected us as well, and I know affected you both, is libel and slander, like things that were not actually true, but being spread around companies and similar to us. So there's a blurred line between the content creators and journalists. Ashley, how can gamers discern the difference when it comes to consuming mis or disinformation around people and companies when it comes to Gamergate? How can people discern the two?
So what you want to do is you always want to consider your source. You can get your opinions, you can get your hot takes, you can get your video game reviews from wherever you want, I don't care. But when you are consuming news, like what is happening in the gaming world, consider your source and always consider reliable sources. Your reliable sources are going to be like your big, tentpole legacy media kind of places. I work for The Verge, which is a vertical of Vox Media.
Are you sure about that?
Again, Ashley Parrish is the one who wrote the Gamergate 2.0 article, but she didn't mention that it all started because of Chris Kendrick. When somebody on Twitter called her out on it, she replied, "Hi, let's chat. We're not going to agree, and that's fine. We don't have to. I don't agree that Kindred calling for the report of the Steam list, Corbutus, constitutes harassment. Associated with that list was a discussion forum, 100 pages of threads filled with terrible shit, up to and including harassment. How is it harassment if you have to go to the forum in order to see what is being said about you? That's not harassment. Getting rid of the list gets rid of that forum, and you'll see now Steam cut that shit out. Those forums are gone, or at least they were last time I checked, and the list is still there. I'm not going to fault Kindred for trying and halfway succeeding at getting a vector for harassment shut down. So that's the first part. You see it your way, I see it mine. As far as the omission of this instigating incident from reporting, okay, let's look at this event holistically, taking everything into account. So she goes on with this bullshit justification that, well, yeah, he may have got upset and did his best to get rid of the list, but the reaction to it, the response isn't justified to the initial inciting incident. But the thing is, you're reporting on a story, you're talking about how terrible Gamergate is. If you really felt that what Chris Kindred did didn't deserve blowing things up like it did, you would report on it and say, yeah, all this person did was say, hey, cut this out for harassment. And then the reaction was just nuclear. She didn't do that. She just omitted it completely. She didn't truthfully and authentically and objectively report the news. She cherry-picked the facts in order to shape a narrative because she knew, just like Alyssa Mercante in her article before her, that if she mentioned what Chris Kindred did, people would understand why gamers were upset. This whole time, when Sweet Baby Inc. first came to the fore, people weren't angry or upset. People were just calling them out for their woke bullshit. What got people legitimately angry was Chris Kindred going after Corbutus's list. And not just the list, but the guy's entire Steam account and game library. This is what kicked things off. And Ashley Parrish didn't mention it at all in her article. And a funny little side note, The Verge is also the home to the guy who leaked Valve's Deadlock.
There's Polygon, there's IGN, there's GameSpot, there's all these different legacy video game websites that have been around for a very long time that have a vested interest in making sure that the things that they share with you, the things that they write, are up to journalistic standards.
IGN are the ones who did the hit piece on Game Science, Black Myth Wukong's devs, because fans were excited about the reveal, and IGN decided to make the game about how the devs hated women. The translations were done by a guy who had an affair with someone in Tencent. That person was probably a dude, and he had an axe to grind. The translations were botched and deliberately misleading to paint the comments in the worst and most uncharitable light. And even then, at their worst, the comments could be considered lewd, crude, and offensive, especially to snowflakes. But in none of the instances, no actual women were even being referenced. Yet this was called misogyny. And this is what I mean when I say I don't take the women in this panel seriously when they talk about like threats and harassment because of the way that they have debased language. They're all doing this 1984 thing of changing definitions. If you offend a woman with your jokes, you're not a misogynist. It's absurd. And it's hilarious how Parrish started off talking about how gamers hate journals who speak truth to power, when all these sites she mentioned, including the one she works for, are just shills for big AAA developers, and are all part of this activist push to change games to fit their agenda, as opposed to serving the customers. Again, people don't hate journals for who or what they are. They hate them for what they do, and how they lie and pretend they're not doing it.
Consider your source and always consider reliable sources. Your reliable sources are going to be like your big, tentpole legacy media kind of places. I work for The Verge, which is a vertical of Vox Media. There's Polygon, there's IGN, there's GameSpot.
Shut up, Meg.
It's funny how Parrish didn't mention Kotaku. And I think it's because she doesn't want people associating her with Alyssa McConte in McConte's article defending Sweet Baby Inc. And also not bringing up the fact that Chris Kindred started all of this in the first place.
And then we hear all of this, so along with the slander and the libel, we obviously got a lot of death threats and slurs in our inboxes, and not even just for us, for our team. I know, Kim, your experiences in your team went through a lot, but
we've been through some stuff.
Yeah, you've been through some things, so please talk on that, and also please talk on...
I've always had a thing for black women with British accents. British accents are cool anyway, but... So, this thing about slurs. To be honest, that could be anything from you to you bitch, you see you next Tuesday, etc. And I'm not condoning that or excusing it or really trying to minimize it to a great extent. But the thing is, victim blaming or not, they brought this on themselves. Whatever abuse they received to some degree is their own fault. Now look, if you have to put black women in everything, you could at least make her look more like this than this.
What is this idea of wokeifying gaming really? What is that when people talk about that?
I mean, I think it's part of it's the greater movement, right, towards a lot of very far right thinking and a lot of very regressive material that's kind of just being pushed out across a lot of different, or at least in a lot of the audiences of a lot of different industries are currently kind of talking about that. And obviously the political landscape is kind of led to a lot of this. But I think
No, it's not just right-wingers. This isn't about getting Trump elected again. This is about gamers and geeks who love this stuff, who love Peter Parker Spider-Man, who love Batman, who find Harley Quinn hot. And we're being told that the things that we love and enjoy are all wrong and bad, and all a part of a larger culture of hate and abuse towards marginalized people. It's insane. It's not the political landscape that led to this. It's your activism that's led to this.
For a lot of people, it really comes down to they see a change that they themselves did not expect. They see a change that they can't fathom that their beloved companies or their beloved teams would ever make themselves. And so they kind of assume that anyone who comes in who looks like myself or other members of my team are the interlopers, right? Our job can only be tied to our identity.
It is, though. It is tied to your identity. You are the interlopers. You need to see yourself in gaming. We already see ourselves in gaming. It's like I said about Screen Rant's Black Myth Wukong review. If you're a woman who needs to see a bunch of women in a game to feel like you belong in gaming, then you don't belong in gaming. These assholes keep pushing women, especially black women, in games now. And when gamers say this is too much, you're only doing this because of feminism, they tell you you need to have empathy. But when it comes to playing games that don't have women in the first chapter or so, all of a sudden, it's not about having empathy and just playing the game from the monkey's perspective. No. Now it's about a lack of diversity and representation, and you must hate women because you're not putting women in your games fast enough.
It's speaking of misinformation, I think the biggest thing for us during this campaign is that I would say that, any kind of, sensitivity work or consulting work in, cultural consultation probably represents about 15% of our work, where the vast majority of it is actually, writing, narrative design, joining writing teams, helping support writing teams, sometimes being the entire writing team for a project or helping with mission design. But the part that really, really gets, everyone assuming that we can't possibly do that other work because all we are is, quote unquote DEI, and we became labeled as this DEI company when the facts of the way that we work are that someone calls in and says, hey, we're making something, we've made a bunch of choices, we'd love you to either help write, help look at them, help talk to us. And even sometimes our cultural consultation is as specific as, it's job consultation. We had to hire a meteorologist at one point to do a consult on a project. And I think that idea of authenticity for people, if you say like, oh, we hired a lawyer because we have to, write about lawyers, no one would ever bat an eye. But they can't imagine that you'd want to bring in someone from a specific background or country or experience to talk about this.
I don't know why they keep doing this. I don't know why they think they can separate the woke stuff from the narrative work that they do. Alyssa Mercante tried to pull this shit in her Sweet Baby Ink defense article. They're not forcing diversity, and anyway, they're really just narrative consultants. That's the same thing. It's all of a piece. Nobody thinks that all they do is draw ugly women for these devs to put in their games. We know they're helping to write, or are even writing these games. That's a huge part of the problem. That's why Miles is a Mary Sue in Spider-Man 2 Electric Boogaloo. That rhymes. That's why MJ is yelling at Peter for being a superhero instead of supporting her and paying the mortgage or whatever. That's why Kratos, the god of war, a Spartan, is crying and whining and sniveling over Atreus, not wanting him to fight, not wanting Atreus to be a man or a god. I don't care about this thing where they're like, well, he's worried about his kid dying. He's lost his wife. He's lost his first wife and his first daughter. I don't care. He's still a Spartan. He's larger than life. He's not just your average middle-class housewife. Then you got Boomerang pissing on Flash in the Suicide Squad game. You got Saga Anderson, who's making this complaint about another white asshole. Now, she was supposed to be Scandinavian, so even if they didn't race swap her, why is she now complaining about another white asshole trying to control who I am and what I do? And this thing about nobody would bat an eye if you hire a lawyer for their expertise. So what's wrong with hiring experts from a particular background for their experience? The thing about that is, there is no such thing as black Vikings, but they forced them in God of War Ragnarok anyway. The black experience has nothing to do with Norse mythology. I'm black too. We are not a part of Norse mythology, but they put them in the game anyway.
And I think there's also this idea that, if a game company is reaching out to external people, that's because they're missing something or they can't handle something, and not because, in the very real world of creation across many different media, people talk to each other. People have writers' rooms. Yeah. Directors and writers of huge movies go to each other's houses and talk and do, punch-ups to each other's scripts. And that's kind of, how creativity works. But this is what it's become.
Yeah. It's very sad to see people doing a lot of the most progressive work become a lot of the most harassment in this phenomenon that was Gamergate, and it was based on a lot of hypocrisy as well, because we saw the hypocrisy of a lot of gamers saying that they and Ash, I'm sure you mentioned this before, saying that they want to make games, but then when marginalized people or people who, if the studios then want to include marginalized people, they're forced to do so.
Yeah,
and
I was actually
feel free to talk on that.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to bring that up because it's interesting that a lot of these Gamergate arguments is that they want developer autonomy. Like, the developers should be able to do whatever it is that they want, and they shouldn't have to kowtow to some kind of ESG corporate overlord that controls their purse strings, when the reality is, with the way that video game development works and with the way video game consultancy works, they have already made those choices. These are the things that you see, the things that they hate, the things that they decry as woke, are the choices that they have already made, and they want to improve them, which is why they bring in people like Kim to help make sure that the things that they have already chosen for their games are as best and as authentic as like not insensitive or relying on stereotypes as they can be, so they can resonate the way that these developers have want them to resonate. So it is very much a very hypocrisy. We're not really paying attention. We don't really care about any of that. Like, it's not about developer autonomy. They don't care about that. They say they do, but they don't. What it really is that they are upset that they're, not seeing the kinds of things that they think they should be seeing, and it makes them mad, and they want to lash out at something, and they have found convenient scapegoats in marginalized people and people of color.
Game science can't make a game that doesn't feature a woman in the first few hours without game journals pushing the misogyny narrative. Shift Up can't make Stellar Blade featuring a sexy android with big tits and ass without IGN losing their minds and blaming them for promoting domestic abuse and assault on women in real life. IGN refuses to review the Lollipop Chainsaw remaster because the devs said they wouldn't censor the game. IGN gave The First Descendant a 5 out of 10, but gave Concord a 7 out of 10 because Concord has the uglier character designs. Kim Belair herself said this.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Talk about hypocrisy. Studios and publishers left and right are being pushed to have DEI in their games. There had been ESG money for years. The diversity hires who spend all day crying about being marginalized. Game journals losing their shit anytime a sexy woman appears in a game. To pretend that these large AAA companies are not being pressured to go to Sweet Baby Inc. is absurd. And like I keep saying, it would be one thing if these woke assholes allowed Stellar Blade to exist alongside Dustborn, but they don't. They just want all games to be Dustborn. And if you do make Stellar Blade, you're a bigot who hates women because you find them sexually attractive. And Ashley Parrish in particular is a disingenuous clown. She wrote an entire article talking about how Black Myth Wukong wasn't worth all the drama, when the drama was literally created by her colleagues, her fellow trusted members of the legacy media. All they had to do was shut up and let the game come out. The charges of misogyny were false, even if the translations were accurate, which they weren't. That wasn't misogyny. Making a game that doesn't feature women in the first 2 chapters isn't sexism. But they keep pushing this shit in the industry. They've created an atmosphere of fear in the West. Devs are afraid to speak out against DEI. They can't make a game about having a family and children to create a legacy in some middle-aged time period without some asshole trying to cancel them for not putting in same-sex marriages in a time and place where it wouldn't happen. But you have these assholes on this raggedy-ass panel talking about gamers don't care about developer autonomy. They're just mad at black women existing. Man, shut the fuck up.
And is it so taking on what you've said, because we also consulted here Black Girl Gamers for a large studio and for other smaller studios as well. And, there's that idea that, again, we're changing the game. And I think it's just because we've got the word black in our name. People are just they have to be aggressive. And it's definitely not the case. But when it comes to Gamergate, we had the first one in 2014. And then 10 years later, we're having the same exact phenomenon, the same behavior perpetuated against marginalized people. And specifically, this wave was about consultation. It was very interesting to see a lack of statement. We've seen, obviously, some studios make recent statements on consultation recently and actually stand by their consultants, which is great. But for the most part, obviously, Kim, you said you make work on like 70, 80 titles, and we've worked on at least a good number. There's been this, underlying kind of silence or just ignoring of the Gamergate situation. And what does the industry need to do to help curb these negative moments in the future? I'll start with Kim.
They're talking about big studios and developers and publishers speaking up for them, but thanks to Sweet Baby Inc. and Black Girl Gamers, a lot of those games have failed miserably, and studios have been shut down because of the shit they've been forcing in those games. She's talking about targeted hate to marginalized people, but what she means is her and her co-workers and friends. Marginalized people aren't getting attacked in the streets because of jiggle physics and Stellar Blade, or because gamers are complaining about MJ's chin. There's nothing about being a black girl gamer that stops you from playing and enjoying 2018 God of War. There's nothing about being trans that stops you from playing and enjoying Space Marines 2. But the people on this panel don't care about games. They care about identity, representation as joy, and cleaning up the industry so that they can take away popular straight white male icons from gamers, along with sexy icons like Lara Croft. Then they act surprised and victimized when people call them out, and expect the industry to protect them after they and their game journal cohorts start calling the customer base bigots. The smartest thing developers and publishers can do at this point is to disavow DEI and consultancy groups altogether. You don't need to make games by committee. If you hire actual writers and actual writing teams, you won't need to go to Sweet Baby Inc. to ask them what's so special about being a Black Norse god. So I'm going to skip ahead a bit because now they're just talking about how Gamergate 2.0 is just a vocal minority. It's really just an annoyance, a distraction. At the end of the day, most normies don't know or care about it at all, and game devs and publishers are still hiring them to work on their games. And that's what this summit is really all about. They're pushing their counter-narrative to Gamergate 2.0 or whatever. But all you have to do is look at the actual games and the failure of these studios, the layoffs. You look at Flintlock and Dustborn and Concord. These are all original IPs that did all the woke DEI ESG crap. They all failed. Now, even though they were original IPs, and there were people out there saying, you told them to make their own games, and yet you still got mad at them when they came out. But nobody was mad at Concord or Dustborn. We were laughing at those games because beyond the fact that we said, stop putting this feminist agenda in popular IPs and genres meant for men, we also said that this stuff isn't popular in gaming at all. Not even the people you claim to be making this shit for want it. Because the people obsessed with gender and identity and communism don't play games. Their hobby is grandstanding and virtue signaling and canceling people online. Gaming is not their hobby.
But the things that I think that they can do is to continue on doing the things that they're kind of doing right now with the way that they are making these games. We have so many games from like AAA and indie that are featuring all these kinds of different characters, these different actors. There are people that are doing the work to make sure that their games are as inclusive, both behind the scenes and, on the game itself. And then that trend has just been continuing on and on and on. And we're seeing this increase of these more diverse games from these diverse narratives and these diverse people.
But see, this is the problem. This is what is helping to tank the Western games industry. She's not describing diversity. She's describing homogeneity, and probably homosexuality in this era of this woke stuff. But she's not saying it's great that devs are making Space Marines 2 for the people who like that kind of game. And it's also great that people are making Dustborn for the people who like that kind of game. She's saying it's great that people who are making Spider-Man 2 Electric Boogaloo are making it more like Dustborn. She's saying that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a great game because it looks like Concord. She's saying that Western devs should keep making all games the same, with ugly women, gay characters that are only gay because representation. If your game is set in feudal Japan, and if you don't have a black person in it, it's not representation, and you're a bigot that's hurting real life gamers. That's what she's saying.
And as long as the industry keeps doing that, that's great. That's really all we need. And what the one thing I will say is that it would help for these big publishers to just maybe one time go like, we don't really rock with you guys. You don't speak for us. We have done the things that, we wanted to do, and this is what it looks like. And if you don't like that, that's fine. There has to be, we have to divorce ourselves from like offending people who might purchase our games, right? Like they don't really say that because they don't want to really step in the shit, and I don't really blame them for it. But at the same time, we have to get comfortable with telling people, if you don't like this shit, then it's not for you, and you can go elsewhere, and that not everything has to be for you, and that this is a game that we decided that we wanted to make, and we're very happy with it, and we're happy with all the choices that we made. And if that's something that bothers you, you go elsewhere, right?
It's so
letting the
funny that you
people
said
know that they're not welcome is probably the best thing we can do.
The funniest thing about that clip is Ashley Parrish is writing a check that she expects game devs and big studios to cash. These people hate gamers, and if Warner Brothers had listened to them and canceled Hogwarts Legacy, they would have missed out on the biggest game of 2023. Not that it ultimately really did much good because of Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League and the other failures they've had, but still. This thing where she's like, publishers should just tell gamers that this game isn't for them. It's jokes. It's nonsense. Because the games that these assholes are injecting with woke and DEI and feminism and activism isn't for them. That's why they changed it. The most unhinged thing about what Parrish just said is that all of this shit comes down to women who these games aren't meant for getting mad and changing them, taking them away from the gamers they were meant for, and demanding that the people who are calling them out be silenced. We don't rock with you. This game wasn't meant for you. Spider-Man is supposed to be for Spider-Man fans. Instead, they made it for fans of deaf black girls and trans-friendly looking women. Gamers told Insomniac to stop putting in the MJ missions. Insomniac ignored them, but when people like Ashley Parrish complained about the cops in the game, Insomniac took them out in the sequel. And yet the women in this panel are trying to gaslight the industry into thinking that gamers are just a bunch of sad, pathetic bigots who hate that black women exist. There's a bit more in this video, but I'm tired of listening to them.
Who the fuck said to speak, Mr. Me, Siamese? Even Christ said Christ, he flows quite nicely. Hype beast highly likely to bite me and try to high-five me, but I just give him high threes, cause y'all don't get to touch me, I'm the shit, sue me if you got an issue, grab a tissue. Mediocrity is odd to me,